Be around the people that live in abundance and learn from them and make that seem like the norm. And you'll rise up to that. You will. You'll learn from them, but then your whole mindset will shift as well.
Joy, welcome to the FITTEAM show.
Chris, I am so excited to be here.
Excited to have you and look forward to learning more about you and your story.
Sure, absolutely. And I just think I am just so thankful to come here, and just the fact that you guys had a part in helping me achieve my Ironman. I just want to start off by saying I am incredibly grateful, and thank you for believing in me, even when I don't know if I believed in myself, but knowing that you guys did, it made all the difference.
That's
it really
an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you. It was fun. It was fun.
Look forward to talking about that. But if we could, let's start early on where you grew up and some hobbies you had as a kid, and we'll start there, and then we'll work through our way through where you're at now.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm a Florida girl, so every time I land, I'm super excited to see my palm trees and the sunshine. Took all that for granted, and then once you move away, you're like, oh, I kind of miss that. So I love coming back to Florida. Grew up in the Tampa area. Middle, lower class. The funny story I like to tell is I didn't realize that burglar bars on houses weren't necessarily normal until I went to school in South Carolina, and I'm driving around and I'm like, man, nobody has burglar bars on their house. Like, what's the deal? And then I realized that, the neighborhood we lived in probably was, middle, lower class. But it's funny how as a kid, you just are used to whatever you grow up as, and you don't know that there's a difference.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So as a kid, what's some hobbies that you had? What was interests that you had?
I was a total tomboy because I was right in the middle of two brothers, and everything was, don't throw like a girl, don't run like a girl, don't like a girl. And, I really tried to hang with the boys, and that's how I got into a lot of sports. And my dad was a professional boxer, so he taught me how to box. I had quite a few fights in the neighborhood, just trying to be one of the boys. So that was pretty much my childhood. It was fun.
I didn't know your dad was a professional boxer.
Yeah, he was. He absolutely was.
So obviously he taught you about discipline and things like that. It's probably what shaped a lot of where you're at today.
Yeah, I think so. And he's the one that, I always tell the story about how I got into running. He was a runner. I was a daddy's girl. And just to be with him, I would wait by the door. So when he would come back, we'd do a little loop. I'm starting like when I was 2. And when I was 3, that's when it started. And I did my first 3-mile race. And then if you think of your earliest childhood memory, I remember as a 4-year-old going into the living room, getting the courage to go in and tell my parents, the 3-year-old race, which is the Gasparilla Distance Classic in Tampa, it's a big race. That's for babies, Mom and Dad. I want to do the 9.3. I'm 4 now. And my mom's mouth dropped. My dad's chest puffed because, of course, he's thinking, oh, that's awesome. And then they made me leave the room. They fought about it. And then they came up with well, if you can run to Grandma's house, which is 5 miles, we'll consider it, because they didn't think I'd be able to do it. And I did.
Wow.
And the rest is history. It was a news story. Like, they blew it up. It was fun. You see this little kid running. And what I learned from that I've taken into the future, and even as I look back to that moment, was for someone that age to run that far, that's not a big deal. They have so much energy. You have a toddler, they're bursting with energy. It was the focus of a 4-year-old to say, I'm going to train, and then I'm going to run that long. Because I think it took me like 3 hours. I mean, it was something crazy. I'm going to run that long without stopping. That's what I go back to, and to inspire myself is the focus of it, not necessarily the distance or the energy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what was next for you after that? After you went out and did that?
I did it every year till I was about 11, 12, and really got into team sports. And then I was like, oh, running's so lonely. It's fun. I got into the team. Basketball was my favorite sport for sure. So I got into basketball, and then that became my next little sports love for a while.
So after high school, what did you do?
So in high school, I played all the sports, all of that. I ended up going to Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola. Pretty much arranged my classes so I could be at the beach as much as possible. And studied radio and television communications. My initial dream was to be an on-air news reporter. And then I pursued that, went on to get my master's at a school in South Carolina at Bob Jones. Did some internships there at an NBC station, and then realized that reporters, it's a struggle to make an income. They got paid back then, we're talking like $12,000 a year. I mean, it was like nothing, because everybody wanted to be a reporter. And then to climb, you had to travel, jump market to market to market to maybe make it to an anchor, to maybe make, what, 50 grand, maybe, then to maybe make it to a bigger market. To really, so it was a long, hard road. And then I quickly realized, the meteorologist pulled me aside and he's like, Joy, why don't you go into sales? He said, you see who's driving the nicer cars out there? It's the salespeople. So that got me into media sales, which kind of translated, into learning pretty much every business out there, learning about them. Because think about it, television sells to everybody. So I was able to learn about a lot of different industries.
So from going into what you were first looking at into sales, that's obviously a big transition.
Yeah, it is. And it's fun how now it's come back around to be able to use, and be on air, even if it is just, social media and that type of thing. But I loved it. I always had a passion for being on camera and telling a story and digging and interviewing. I mean, I always loved that. So I'm glad that I'm able to circle back around this many years later and be able to, be involved in that type of thing again.
So what advice do you have for someone that's, that is wants more, and obviously sales is probably the way to get it for a lot of people. What advice do you have for them?
I did a post yesterday, I think, and it was talking about making an income while making an impact. And it was funny, some of the replies, because a lot of people, they were like, I'm making an income, but I'm not making an impact, or I'm making an impact, but I'm not making an income. But you got to be able to do both to be able to feel fulfilled and to be able to feel like you're fulfilling your purpose. And, that makes all the difference, because for me, now that it's evolved into helping with healthcare, I'm real passionate about helping people, get the best healthcare that's out there. And in order to have and maintain good healthcare, the ecosystem's got to have competition, and that comes with the private practice. So my goal is to help keep the private practices alive and thriving, and that ends up providing the best healthcare for people, because where there's competition, there's going to be good service.
Absolutely. So media sales up until now, talk a little bit about that, what happened between there?
So I was after I left, it's funny, we were talking about kids. I know you just had another little one. And after my first child and trying to work and put him in daycare, we got to the point we ran out of sick days and we didn't have family in town. And we both looked at each other and we were like, okay, they're not going to take him because he's got a temperature. What do we do? And my dream at that point was to be able to have more flexibility. And the opportunity came up. I started my own advertising agency, was able to work from home. And then and then when I had the rest of my kids, and not that that's easy, working from home and juggling little ones, that's a whole nother level of challenge. But at least, we weren't running out of sick days and I could be there. And that's kind of how I launched into that, and then picked up healthcare clients, and then got passionate about healthcare and helping them grow.
So when did your passion for running come back?
So it was just this last year, after being on LinkedIn and really just... Let me back up. The reason I think LinkedIn is so addictive and so well for those who are so involved is because every time you log on, there is like this growth coming at you. You're learning something new. You're learning about a new industry. You're being challenged. And that growth mindset, I think organically, we're wired to want that, because that's when you feel the most alive, when you're getting somewhere, when you're growing. And so as I began to shift that mindset on LinkedIn, I was wanting to grow my business, and I was like, wow, I just feel like I'm all over the place. I'm stuck. What can I do to challenge myself? Because professionally, I felt like I was at a wall. And that's when I came across that little picture that I was telling you about of when I was 4 years old running this race. And I saw that picture, and you just see this focus on my face. And I was like, I need that focus. I need that. What can I do? And I was like, you know what? I've never run a 26.2 marathon ever. I said, I'm going to make that my New Year goal. And so I started, I think, December 30th. Up until that point, I mean, I'm very consistent in healthcare and health and keeping up and eating, but it was just like your normal 30-minute cardio, weights 3 times a week, just real, consistent, but nothing major. And so that first night on December 30th, I said, let me go try to run 9 miles, see what it feels like, just to start the training. And I did, and it was doable and it was good. And I learned so much through the training of pushing myself and disciplining, and, and running that first marathon, it was a big deal. It was hard. I think anybody who's run a full marathon, you have, that's a distance to respect, no matter how many times you run it. And that's what kind of started the snowball of not stopping and continuing other health challenges and fitness challenges.
Did you run any half marathons before the full?
No, just in training. Because in training, you get up to 20 miles. So
you just decided I'm going right for the full. I'm not even doing a half.
Well, because if I can go out and just run 9 miles like that.
Sure.
In my mind, I was like, oh, I'll just do a half. And then I knew that's not a challenge for you. You
Right.
could do that in probably like 3 weeks. That's not going to be a challenge. And that's what's important, I think, for everybody. You know what your real challenge is. Don't sell yourself short.
Right.
That's a good lesson right there. Like, don't think, oh, I'm going to challenge myself and do something that you know doesn't scare you. You have to do something that scares you. Literally, because this race was in Hawaii, and as we drove to the top of the mountain that morning, the bus kept going and going and going, and I'm thinking, holy cow, this is how far we're running? And I was sick to my stomach. I mean, I was so scared. And that's what I knew. That's the challenge I needed. You've got to feel like, it's going to take everything you got to get it done. That's when you know you challenged yourself,
Right.
Because if you fail, so what? Go do it again. You learn it, and then you figure out what to do next time. But there's something about feeling that feeling in your stomach and knowing this is big. Because then when you accomplish it, the feeling is amazing.
Right.
It's so amazing.
And the most important thing is once you achieve one goal is to set a new goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's how it happened. So we were in Hawaii. This was a downhill marathon, which sounds easy. But what I didn't know was it actually uses, it's eccentric. I think that's I don't know the exact term, but it's using both your quads and your hamstrings at the same time. So it really just wrecks your body because you're going a lot faster than you're used to running. You're pounding on all of your muscles. And I really couldn't even walk the next 2 weeks, really hardly. So I wanted my husband to see Hawaii, and so we did a helicopter tour the next day so we could at least go see everything. I had been there a lot, but he hadn't. And as we're going over the Kona coast, the helicopter pilot says, so Joy, what's next? An Ironman? And I was like, oh shoot, why did he say that? Because I knew I had already started this growth thing and I didn't need any new ideas. And then it never left my mind. And then I was like, but I don't even know how to swim. I don't even really know how to bike or cycle. I was like, that's impossible. That's so much trouble. But it wouldn't leave my mind. And I knew that became my goal. And so then I threw that out there too. I was like, I'm going to learn how to swim and cycle, and I'm going to do an Ironman. And it got tricky because everyone I scheduled to do something with work or family would come up, and I was ready to just dismiss it. But actually there was one guy on LinkedIn who his kids do Ironmans. He's older and his kids are grown. And he kept on me. He kept saying, Joy, when are you doing it? When are you doing it? And he went, and I was like, I can't let him, I don't know, it sounds weird, but I was like, I don't want to let these people that I'm always speaking about this, like, you got to practice what you preach. I don't want to go back on a goal that I had. And I'm so glad I didn't, Chris. I'm so glad I didn't. Because, look, I would have never gotten even farther than that. Because even going into the 70.3, another moment, I was sick the night before, like sick, dreading the date. Like every day I look at the calendar and I'm like, it's coming. September's coming. As soon as I finished it, before that I thought people who do fulls are crazy. I mean, that's just insane. Who can do a full? I would never do that. But as soon as I finished the 70.3 and saw that I had accomplished that, I was like, you know what? I can do it. It's just, and it just reminds you that everything in life is just a step that you build on. Like, you can't look at the end and your end dream goal and think, if you look too far ahead, it's too overwhelming. It's just, let me do the first step. Let me get there. And then let me get here. And even like in your business, if a young kid were to come in and say, oh, how did Chris do all that? That's not what he has to look at. It's like, how did Chris start? What was the first thought he had?
Right.
Go there and build up from there. Right. It's not, and so then that was the process. So then after that, I decided, you know what, I've got to do a full before the year ends. I've got to. And the difference there with the full, which I put up on a post as well, was I wasn't sick to my stomach. I wasn't scared the night before. And yet this was going to be my biggest challenge, right? I mean, 2.4 miles swim in the ocean, 112-mile bike, and a 26.2 marathon. I wasn't scared. I just learned to respect the preparation and the grit it was going to take. And it was a whole different feeling. And it's funny how your mindset shifts, because after I did the swim and the bike, when I got to the marathon, which, remember, beginning of the year was like overwhelming, I was like, oh, phew, all I have left is a marathon. I mean, look at that shift.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole different mindset shift.
That is. So when was the marathon and what was the dates for these 3?
So my first marathon was in March,
Mm-hmm.
and then I did the full Ironman in November.
Wow.
So through that time, I learned how to swim, which swimming is hard. It's technique. It's learning, and I still am not a good swimmer, I would say. I have a lot of technique to work on, but yeah.
So your first marathon and Ironman in the same year?
All in the same year. And I learned to swim and cycle because I never really swam before.
So people are probably asking, what's next?
I'm looking at the Alcatraz swim. That just seems kind of cool. And then my goal is to really just shave my time. I did it in exactly what I wanted to do it in because I wanted to enjoy the first race. You know, I didn't want to, and you don't know how much steam I'm going to have in there. So you kind of just, hold back a little bit. So I need to shave about 4 hours off my time, which that's a lot. But logistically, there's a lot I can take off just in the bike and not stopping and a lot of stuff. And I would love to make it to Kona, and you got to qualify for that. So
For those that don't know what Kona is, talk a little bit
so
more
Kona
about
is the
that.
World Championship, and in Hawaii, and in order to get there, you have to at least win your age group in one of the races and to claim a spot. And even then, it's kind of tricky because you have to win it, but there's certain spots. It's kind of I don't even understand the whole process, but I just know I've got to at least get down to like a 10-hour, 11-hour Ironman to have the chance of doing that.
So what advice do you have for anyone that's looking to do their first marathon, let's say, or half marathon?
It's
or
all
Ironman?
it's all in the mindset, and once again, it's not even about an Ironman or athletic. It's about just envisioning it and seeing it and realizing that really you can accomplish anything you set your mind to if you are consistent and you take those steps to discipline yourself and you hold on to the vision. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, I can't tell you, I'd be running in the country or wherever, but I was always envisioning the beach or wherever that destination was going to be that I was doing my race. I always envisioned that in my mind. Even last night I was swimming in a regular pool, which I hate swimming in a pool right now. I love open water. But I took myself back to Cozumel and seeing the fish and seeing everything, and my whole swim, I wasn't there. I was where I wanted to be swimming.
A lot of people struggle with consistency, and obviously it's so important. It's everything. What advice do you have for them?
Consistency is your personal integrity. That's exactly what it is. We will keep promises to so many people, but we don't keep our own promises to ourselves. And that's why I struggle sometimes. I love personal trainers. I love having coaches, and I think you need them. But it's funny, I was talking to a Ironman coach the other day, and this lady paid thousands of dollars. She didn't even make it past the swim. Why? Because it didn't come from her. It's got to start with you, and then a coach or a trainer can take you to the next level. But at the end of the day, it's all you. It's that person in the mirror that you've got to keep those promises you make to yourself. Because without that, what do you have? I mean, that's where character starts.
Obviously, it started with your parents and your dad. Who else can you say? Who else has been part of your life that you would consider maybe that your team or whatever that's helped you get to where you're at? And
it's people that believe in you. It's so funny. And you have to learn. Sometimes the people closest to you are the naysayers because it's their own, limitations that they put on you. Or they're worried about you. Or I know right before I went out to the race, I had a family member say, "Now too much exercise can be bad. Be careful." But I would say my kids especially, I think, because I want to set an example for them. And there's nothing like when the teenage boys in your house are like, "Mom, that's pretty awesome," like to give the respect of them. I don't know, that sounds weird, but it's pretty cool because at that age, not much is cool to them, especially a mom.
I love that. Obviously, a lot of people use their kids as an excuse to not do something, and you're taking the exact opposite. Is you're using them as a reason to go out and do something and inspire them and show them what can be accomplished. Just touch on that for a second. It's
funny you say that because yesterday someone put up a post about, like paying people to do other things and because your time's important, which I totally agree with. And I was like, that's what kids are for now. I have my kids doing the grocery shopping and picking each other up from school. And I, looking back now, we have 5 kids. And I would say I have learned so much from them. First of all, you learn time management, just like we were talking about. When you have a little baby or you have little toddlers, the time you do have is so valuable. You don't get distracted. You sit down, you focus, you get it done, because you're always on borrowed time. You don't know who's going to be sick the next day, who you're going to have to stay home with, who's going to have a school meeting. You're always on borrowed time, and you really learn to get a lot done and become very efficient. That's one of the big things having kids has taught me. And then also, just they're going to call you out. You have to practice what you preach with kids, because they see you every minute, and just the multitasking and the patience and seeing them interact with each other. I know I wouldn't be anywhere near as, I don't want to say accomplished, but as driven and proficient and efficient without having been a mom. I don't know how people without that do that, because that's what I needed to mold and shape me, especially that many, because it's like, yeah, you can handle a lot, you can handle a lot. And it's all relative. Like when you have one, it seems overwhelming. Then you have two and you're like, oh, one seems easy. Then you have three and you're like, two was easy. It's all relative. And you got to be gracious as you face other people with that, and not look down on, which I don't. But at the same time, I think the more you grow, the more you can accomplish. God's like, you know what, I've given you that for a reason, because I know you can handle a lot. And now you can handle a lot in a lot of areas. And it's about being a full person. I don't know if that made any sense. It kind of went all over the place.
It did. So talked about, having goals, consistency, not using excuses. What else would you add for anybody that's an entrepreneur athlete? Because a lot of the same things, obviously, are incorporated to have success.
I would just say, make sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's funny how before this, I didn't even know one person personally who had ever done an Ironman. I didn't know anybody. So I didn't have anybody to talk to. But once I put that out there, so many people through social media started reaching out to me, including pros, and walking me through everything. And all of a sudden, I went from this whole group that was like, wow, that's crazy. That seems far. That's a lot. To, no, this is every day. This is normal. This is easy. You can do it. It's just this. And there's the same thing, with your professional life. If you're around people who are successful, who are making a lot of money, who are accomplishing these big goals, the goals don't seem so big anymore. They seem like the norm.
Right.
And so you got to be so careful that you don't stay around the scarcity mindset if you're wanting to be in an abundance mindset. Be around the people that live in abundance and learn from them and make that seem like the norm, and you'll rise up to that. You will. You'll learn from them, but then your whole mindset will shift as well.
Absolutely. What's some last words that you want to share with the audience?
The last words I want to share is that everybody's an influencer, because we all have the potential to change people's behavior. And that's my goal. It doesn't have to be thousands, but my main goal is to at least change one. And it's been neat and humbling to see that has translated to a lot more than I ever thought, that are losing weight, doing, athletic events, they just are more driven and excited about fitness just because they follow my journey. And that to me is what makes, having influence over people worth it. So everybody is an influencer. It's just, how are you influencing?
That's awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.